Good morning, Robert. Beautiful morning to be walking on the embankment and for having a look at the National COVID Wall. Since we're making our way along from the Garden Museum towards Westminster, we've come to the unofficial bit, first of all. I mean, this was just done, presumably, by the bereaved, whereas for the rest of it, the hearts were painted first, and then people adopted them later on.
Well, obviously done by the bereaved. This is Joan Cook and Arthur Cook, commemorated here by their children and grandchildren.
Yeah,
So
I think that
mum, grandma, dad, granddad.
I think all the writing was done by the bereaved, but for the semi-official sections, because you're quite right that none of it is actually official. It was a people's project rather than any kind of official project. So for the other section, they assembled a large team of volunteers to paint the hearts, and then people adopted them later.
Oh, I didn't know that. Some of it's fading. It's a bit sad. Of course, one good thing is that it's in the shade because it's north facing, or is it west facing? I never know with the river around here.
It's very confusing. I quite agree. Now, you see, we're just coming now to the part which was...
I know it's in the shade for much of the day.
Painted by the volunteers rather than by the individuals. And so, you see, there's a lot of them that haven't been adopted yet.
Oh, I see. So, and they're rather small as well. Well, there are some bigger ones. What I like about it is it's spontaneous, and it's from the heart, and it's not aggressive. It's not drawing attention to itself as architecture or a commemoration. It's just very simple, from people to people.
And it's got a real poetic quality to it. It keeps reminding me of the Flanders Poppies.
Yes. Being red, of course, it'll fade. That's the thing, and it is fading.
Yeah, I think it's done with marker pens, and so there's no possibility of permanence.
Which is part of the almost elegiac process of life, isn't it? Things fade.
Well, that's always been a wonderful quality of the Flanders Poppies, actually, that they only live for a short time as a symbol for how short everybody's life is. And the fading of the hearts on the COVID memorial has got exactly that quality.
It's... I wonder how they've done the numbers. I wonder how many they're representing. Have they managed to cover everybody?
When they made the memorial, they were expecting about 100,000 COVID deaths. And so in case there were more, I think that they calculated that there would be 150,000 hearts.
We should note how many people have died in the UK up till today from COVID officially.
I think it is over 100,000, don't you?
I suppose so, yes. But I used to look at these figures every day, but I don't follow it anymore.
No.
It's a repetition. It's the feeling of it going on and on and on, which is elegiac.
I don't really see how they could renew it, because if they were to do so, they would be drawing over the writing that the bereaved have put on. And so it would be a deliberate act of extinction, really. It would be rubbing them out of history and replacing them with an anonymous memorial again. I mean, they can't really expect the people who did the writing to come back and rewrite it, can they?
No, but I think they can just... It could become like a fourth bridge, which is just repainted or recoloured.
Yes, but then you've lost the names, and so you've lost its poignancy.
Yes, or it might be that the black lettering is going to last longer. Oh look, there's some flowers here.
Can you just point to them again?
There's some flowers here. There's some flowers here. And the colours vary. Some have been recoloured recently, or are colouring, or have they been done in wax crayon maybe, or paint, which seem to be much brighter and maybe longer lasting. Grandma, 1946 to 1920.
Oh.
Love. Good night. God bless Dave Hewitt.
Interesting to write the greeting without putting the name of the person that it applies to.
Well, it's personal if it's grandma and granddad. Diana
Yes,
Cook, mum, sister. 19th of December 1920, just before Christmas. Oh look, there's a purple one. Maureen Paddy Nash.
I wonder if they started off this intense red colour and it's faded to pink. I think they did actually. I think that the pink, which looks a bit like a gay pride colour, I think that's resulted from the fading of the marker pens that were used.
Undoubtedly, you know, network. What's it? Network rail. Red became grey. Red light blue is a very fugitive colour. My hero, Robert Carroll, Dad, Papa, Grandpa, lot of older people.
Yeah, I looked up to find out what the origin of it was, and apparently it was a group of 4 men who met in a pub in Stoke Newington, and they'd had some previous experience of protesting against Brexit, and so they'd done public memorials. And they started off with posters actually. They put up a poster near the pub, and then they started going to significant locations for posters, like Dover, which was associated with Nigel Farage. And when they lost the Brexit argument, they had another idea. They still wanted to get at the government, and so they had this other idea that government incompetence and deceit had also caused the COVID outbreak, which I regard as doubtful. And so they wanted to protest against that.
Well, I didn't get that message from being here. I didn't see this as being political.
No, I quite agree.
If anything, this is personal.
You don't get it. But the name of the group was Led by Donkeys.
Oh, yes,
Obviously remembering the First World War with lions led by donkeys. And so that's, with the link to the First World War, that makes me wonder what we would think if it was a First World War memorial commissioned by pacifists, by conscientious objectors.
More flowers here. In amongst the leaves of autumn.
I mean, what would you think about a First World War memorial commissioned by pacifists? I mean, what I think first before you comment. I would think that it shouldn't be political. It seems to me, I mean, you know, if it's commemorating the First World War, then there must be a lot of people who believed in fighting for king and country. I mean, many more in that case than there are conscientious objectors. But when it comes to COVID, I would have thought it was pretty evenly balanced. I would have thought there's a lot of people who think that the deaths resulted from government incompetence, but then also a large group of people who were in support of the various measures that the government took. And so with it being split like that, I'm not in favour of a political axe being ground by a memorial. They chose the name National COVID Memorial. There's no official backing for that. What do you think about those comments?
I'm just hearing them. I don't see this being political in any way. I see this as being a place of commemoration and of remembrance and of sorrow.
Well, what do you think of the location? That's an interesting, a very interesting question. Comments?
Well, it's by the tuberculosis, what I think of as the tuberculosis terrace of St Thomas's.
I mean, the wall belongs to St Thomas's.
I think of it more than that, because I've been a Thomas inmate recently, a patient. What you're thinking of it being opposite the Houses of Parliament.
Well, it's both. I mean, that's what makes it a very interesting location, that it's part of a hospital, and then it is also obviously intended to be a banner, criticising the government that was in office when the COVID outbreak took place.
Yes, I suppose so. It's interesting. It's quite a lot. This is clearly used by patients and former patients, and as well as staff.
Stuff. My mum told me that she did her courting here. I don't think it can have been all that often, although my dad worked in a hospital. I think they must have had their first kiss here. So it's a touching location for me.
There's an interesting pattern along here where the hearts have been aligned.
So, Robert, we're getting towards the end of the walk. What about its future? Do you think it should just be allowed to fade away by the poppies? Or do you think it should be endlessly renewed? Or do you think there should be another COVID memorial, a different form in a different place?
Oh, I think we should remember the COVID epidemic.
Yes.
One thing that surprises me, although I knew all my grandparents who lived through, as did my parents, through the First World War, nobody ever mentioned the flu, so-called Spanish flu epidemic of 1918 to 1919, which had a greater death toll than certainly this current COVID epidemic has had in this country. I did know about it from reading, but I think that's simply I just chanced about it. It was never mentioned in the family. And there's similar with Helen, my wife. She said her family never mentioned it. I didn't understand that except to say that maybe it was just subsumed in the equal tragedy of the First World War.
Well, a friend of my dad's he gave me a copy of the speech that he gave when he retired. And the point he made was, in a London hospital where he'd been working, that when he was a young man there, and I think he worked there all his life, when he walked through the wards, the great majority were young people with infectious diseases, and the death toll was terrible. Whereas by the time he retired, the infectious diseases had mostly been, diphtheria, smallpox, they'd mostly been eliminated. And so there was an entirely different hospital population. Young people with sort of mental and drug problems, but predominantly old people. And so going back to the flu epidemic, probably people were more accustomed to death from infectious disease then than they are now.
Yes.
Toughened.
I mention it because of your point. I think we should remember the present epidemic over the next century. Not forget it, as we clearly have forgotten the Spanish flu epidemic institutionally. and particularly in terms of, as you mentioned it, in terms of government. So to renew it in some way, to keep it going, would be a good thing.
But then there's many other medical tragedies, and I think particularly of smoking, where the evidence for a link between smoking and lung cancer was suppressed for a long time. And so one could say that a great many more people died than need have done. So should we have a national memorial to nicotine?
Well, smoking, tobacco is self-inflicted in a sense. You can choose to take it or choose not to take it.
Well, but you could say something similar to COVID, that because I think 80% of COVID deaths are obese people. And so you could say, well, that's self-inflicted as well.
You can say that. I wouldn't say that. We will never forget you. Much you loved us, even though it was hard to say. We'll never forget how hard you fought every single day. We'll never forget how you made us feel like only a father can.
You will always be our hero, and the rest of the message is gone. So, have you got any ideas at all, if you were asked to propose, without having a national COVID memorial, have you any thoughts at all for what you would do?
Keep it if it's possible. It's very appropriate. Keep it.
And what do you think about the principle of citizen groups adopting public walls for graffiti? I mean, it works very well here, but it isn't a principle that I would want to encourage. And I remember Immanuel Kant, never act except that the principle on which you act is universalizable, the categorical imperative.
Well, here we have to disagree because oh look, here's it's a wood, isn't it?
Yes.
So that's, and photographs as well. You need to take some pictures of the photographs.
I've done it.
Yeah. I disagree with Kant.
It's the golden rule. It's the principle of almost all the religions. You can find it in Christianity, in Buddhism, in Hindu. It's the golden rule. I mean, it's Mrs. Do-It would be done by.
Yeah, but a wall isn't doing something to somebody.
Well, it's graffiti. I mean, what do you think about the principle of having graffiti on public buildings?
I would quote you Rome, and also quote the area under the Queen Elizabeth Hall, which has been protected, which we're going to be walking past fairly shortly. In fact, that might make a discussion point.
Yeah.
That's a place that's been taken over, but it's also been protected by our former Mayor of London. It was Boris Johnson who declared it should be protected.
Okay, Robert, we're at the end of the wall. It's been a very pleasant wall. Thank you.
Thank you.